Welcome to Course 453, International Organizations. Study Section 2, Theoretical Issues in International Relations. Introduction. Theories are useful for understanding the world because social and political phenomena are complex due to the rapid or quickening pace of change. There is a need for theories to make social and political phenomena appear meaningful and intelligible. In this study session, we shall acquaint ourselves with the theories that have been developed to justify the need for international organizations. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define and use correctly the term in bold, theory. 2. Discuss the disposition of foundational theories in international relations. 3. Explain the theories of integration. 4. Discuss at least 2 contemporary theories in international relations. Definition of theory. A theory is a set of hypotheses postulating the relationship between variable or conditions advanced to describe, explain, or predict phenomena and make prescriptions about how positive changes ought to be engineered to realize particular goals and ethical principles. Kegley, 2007. A theory can also be defined as a set of general statements that proposes an explanation to events in reality. There are several theories in international relations which are useful in the study of international organizations. Some of them are discussed below. Foundational theories in international relations. Realism. Realism, also known as realpolitik, is a theoretical perspective which emphasizes state as the most important actor in global politics, the anarchical nature of the international system, and the pursuit of power to secure national interest. Historically, realism has been the perspective from which leaders and scholars approach international politics. The first proposition of realism is that states are the most important actors in global politics, and these states are sovereign, the highest authority over its territory without outside interference. The second proposition is that states go into international politics to pursue their national interests and not to promote any ideology or value. In order to effectively realize their national interest, states try to maximize their power. The realists also propose that the international system is anarchic, having no overarching political authority or world government. In the absence of central authority to moderate international politics, states resort to self-help in the protection of their national interest. This makes states to compete with one another, resulting to intermittent wars between states as their national interests clash. For the realists, since states are principally concerned about their national interest, they will be hesitant to form associations or organizations that do not advance their own interest. States, as sovereign entities, would not submit to any higher authority under an international organization. They argue that even when states enter into the formation of international organizations, the international organizations become instruments for the pursuit of the national interest of states. They argue that states have not shared off their concerns for their national interest, and as a result, their self-interested pursuit would fuel their involvement in international organizations. Major contributors to the theory of realism include Thucydides, who used to explain the relationship between the actors Peloponnesian Wars between Athens and Sparta in 431 to 404 BC, and Hans James Morgenthau, who is considered the father of modern realism with his work Politics Among Nations, first published shortly after World War II. Though realism dominated the 20th century thinking about international politics, other theories have emerged to differ with its specific propositions. Liberalism. Liberalism is a theoretical perspective that emphasizes interdependence among states and other non-state actors as the key characteristic of the international system. Due to a complex interdependence of states and other transnational actors, there is the tendency for states to cooperate in international politics. Unlike realism that sees states as the only significant actors, liberalism maintains that There are other equally important non-state transnational actors, including multinational corporations, MNCs, non-governmental organizations. Also, the proponents of liberalism maintain that humanity is now faced a multiplicity of issues outside security concerns that were emphasized by the realists. These issues include economic, environmental, ideological, religious, and cultural factors which states cannot confront without reasonable cooperation. These issues and more do not lend themselves to military solutions, and even the most powerful states cannot claim to have all that it takes to tackle them. Even the absence of any central government, states cooperate because it is in their best interest. This tendency for increased cooperation among international actors accounts for the proliferation of international organizations since the end of World War II. Idealism. Idealism focuses on the importance of morality and values in international relations. The idealists argue that foreign policy should be and is sometimes formulated according to cooperative and ethical standards. According to the idealist, there are rules, laws, conventions, and protocols that states and other international actors observe as they interact in the international system. Idealists, on the other hand, argue that humanity is defined by a harmony of interest, and it is this common interest that makes states enter into jointed effort to manage challenges. For idealists, the overly emphasis on competition and self-interest attributed to the realist theory is grossly amiss. A great deal of interstate relations is born out of genuine concern for others and the desire to cooperate to solve common problems. Idealists advocate for international organizations. Neo-Marxism. Neo-Marxism is a theoretical perspective which sees international system as a system of capitalist system of exploitation and global competition among economic classes. To the neo-Marxist, economic considerations are the primary concern of actors in the international system. Economic interests are at the root of global politics. To the neo-Marxist, international politics reflects class struggle on the world stage. They take a historical view of global politics and see the international as reflecting the internationalization of the capitalist mode of production. They use the concept of imperialism and the dependency theory to explain the historic interactions between the developed world and the underdeveloped world. According to them, states there are also class relations among states of the world. These states are grouped into core and periphery states. The core states are the developed capitalist states which control global capital and technology, while the periphery states are the less developed states that only have their raw material. Theories of integration. Integration is both a process and an end. As a process, it refers to attempts to build or develop a political community. As an end, it refers to a political community. The process of integration must be undertaken through consensus or by consent. Where it is done otherwise, particularly through coercive means, it is no longer integration, but rather imperialism. Doherty and Subgraph, 1997, Evans and Newham, 1997. Whereas prior integrative efforts have been channeled towards the creation of modern state, the emphasis in the literatures on integration is the creation of a political community which transcends state or national borders. More specifically, the emphasis is on regional integration or international integration. An integrated political community must possess certain structural characteristics such as collective decision-making mechanism. Since integration must proceed through consent rather than compulsion, it must be premised on areas where cooperation are desirable, problem areas where nation-states cannot unilaterally find solutions to and are thus inclined to act cooperatively, e.g., international trade, environment, communication, migration, health, investment, transportation, ecology, and so on. There are two types of integration theory that will be explored shortly. Functionalism. Theory of functionalism was a development of the need to not only foster peace among nation-states, but to pave way for cooperation among them after the ugly experience of the two world wars. It was based on an understanding that the problem was not how to keep nations peacefully apart, but how to bring them actively together. Thus, sustainable peace would be maintained by focusing on issues of human welfare and how to attain it rather than human warfare and how it was conducted. According to this variant of the integration theory, there are common needs that can unite people across state boundaries. As David Mitrani argued, the world of the 20th century was characterized by growing numbers of technical issues that could be resolved only by cooperation across state boundaries. For functionalists, integration should proceed based on areas that are non-political and non-contentious, and that is by steering the integration process along this line that integration can be successful. This would imply assigning tasks on a sector basis, that is, health, investment, etc. Where cooperation in one area proves successful, it would encourage cooperation in others. This is what Mitranis calls ramification. By ramification, it means success in cooperation in one task could create a change in attitudes in favor of greater integration. New functionalism. New functionalism is a descendant of functionalism. Basically, unlike functionalism that evades political issues in the integration process, new functionalism is distinctly oriented towards the political aspects and implications of integration. Central to this argument is the view that sector integration will lead to a spillover effect into related areas of activity. As interest groups within member states begin to see the positive benefit of the process, they will initiate moves for further integration. Contemporary theories in international relations. Theory of Pacific settlement. Theory of Pacific settlement is a set of propositions on alternative ways of resolving international disputes peacefully instead of resorting to war. The theory consists of a number of assumptions or hypotheses concerning why men and states resort to war with one another. The first hypothesis is that war is a product of heated passion. It arises from uncontrolled emotion, from anger and fear. War is the manifestation of national tantrums. As a result, the theory proposes that parties in a dispute can be heard to settle there by providing them a cooling off period during which their temper will be lowered. This is the basis of the practice of ceasefire and the mechanism of good offices, especially under the framework of international organizations. The second assumption of the theory of Pacific settlement is that war is a repetition of misconceptions or even misrepresentation of fact of situations. The theory proposes a solution to this problem through the use of the instrumentality of commission of inquiry to ascertain the fact of the situations. The third assumption is that conflict situations escalate into more deadly wars because of pride and egoistic considerations on the part of the parties to the dispute, which hinder them from coming together to negotiate directly and resolve their differences. Thus, the theory sees the need for a neutral mediator, an interposing third party, preferably acting under the auspices of an international organization, to initiate contact between the parties in dispute. The theory of Pacific settlement maintains that issues in contention should be debated at international organizations where there will be direct representatives of states. It proposes the replacement of bilateral diplomacy with multilateral diplomacy under international organizations such that the force of public opinion can be used to check excess of nation-states. Theory of collective security. Collective security is a security arrangement among states based on the principle that an act of aggression by any state will be met by a collective response from the rest. Kegley, 2009, page 35. It is based on the logic that attack on one is attack on all, and the principle of one for all and all for one. Collective security is a security system formed by states which sign a treaty and make an explicit commitment to do two things. 1. Renounce the use of force to settle disputes with each other, and 2. Promise to use force against any state that breaks the rule. Ziegler, 1997. The aim is to provide reasonable deterrence for potential aggressor by the prospect of an overwhelming coalition. If deterrence fails, then the aggressor will be defeated by military action undertaken by this coalition. Collective security system involve the establishment of a complex scheme of national commitment and international mechanisms designed to prevent or suppress aggression by any state against any other state by presenting a potential aggressor with a credible threat and a potential victim of aggression with a reliable promise of effective collective measures ranging from diplomatic boycott, economic measures, and military actions to enforce peace. Claude, 1971. In the words of Ziegler, collective security applies only to what goes on inside the system. Its purpose is to keep peace among its members, not to protect them against outsiders. For this reason, such security organizations as NATO, Warsaw Pact, and similar organizations cannot be said to be collective security systems, properly so called. They might go collective defense organizations or simply alliances to protect members from threats posed by non-members of the defense system. Two significant historical attempts to put the theory of collective security into practice can be seen in the formation of the League of Nations and the United Nations. Their founders hoped to prevent wars among states by organizing a system of collective security that would mobilize the entire international community against possible aggressors. However, Hines Claude, after examining its performance between 1920 and 1939, concluded that the League of Nations as an instrument of collective security was a failure. The acid test for the League in this respect was the invasion of Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, by Italy in 1935. The League failed to prevent the aggression, and when it occurred, it could not raise a counterforce against the aggressor. Nevertheless, it was not an unqualified failure because the feeble attempt made by the League to protect Abyssinia demonstrated that member states had begun to subscribe to the basic principle of one for all and all for one, which is integral to the collective security system. After the World War II, there was a rethinking of the practice of the theory of collective security in the establishment of the United Nations. The League of Nations had operated the principle of unanimity among the great powers in the League Council. The founders of the United Nations saw the principle of unanimity as a major weakness in the institutional mechanism for the enforcement of collective security. They replaced it with majoritarian principle qualified by great power veto. However, this change appeared to have turned out to be even more problematic than the old principle of unanimity. Consequently, up to the 1970s, the only successful example of collective security under the UN was the defense of South Korea against an aggressive attack by North Korea in 1950. Even this was a qualified success for several reasons. First, the action was not carried out under the auspices of the UN Security Council, as was envisaged under Chapter 7 of the Charter. Rather, it was authorized by the General Assembly, which creatively introduced what came to be known as the Uniting for Peace Resolution. Moreover, the action in Korea was made possible from the temporary absence of the Soviet Union from the Security Council. During the Cold War, there was a practical rejection of collective security by the leaders of the two opposing ideological camps, the United States and the Soviet Union. They went ahead to establish rival security organizations, namely the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, under the leadership of the US, and the Warsaw Treaty Organization, also known as the Warsaw Pact, under the leadership of the Soviet Union. Even among less powerful states, under the umbrella of the non-aligned movement, there was also turns to embrace collective security in practice. Study section summary. In this study session, you learn that a theory is a set of interrelated statements that proposes an explanation to events in reality. The foundational theories of international relations, idealism and realism, have different orientation towards international relations. Realist theory sees the international system as a mosaic of power-driven and self-interested states. On the other hand, idealism sees the international system as a community of interdependence which necessitates international collaboration and international organizations. Functionalism and neo-functionalism are theories of integration with common features but differ in their emphasis. Functionalism stresses the need for integration to proceed from non-political issues, while neo-functionalism stresses political issues. Collective security system involves the establishment of a complex scheme of national commitments and international mechanisms designed to prevent or suppress aggression by any state against any other state by presenting a potential aggressor with a credible threat, and a potential victim of aggression with a reliable promise of effective collective measures. Collective security is a theory behind the formation of the League of Nations and the United Nations. This is the end of study section 2. Thanks for listening.